with prominent figures from the field to expand on some of the conversations catalyzed by the exhibitions on view. So for tonight's program, we have current artist in residence E.J. Hill, who's joined by Tavia Nyong'o, cultural critic and performance studies scholars at Yale University, to discuss performance and the body as the site of radical dialogue. And we'll move on to unpack the visibility and richness of the Black body and Black lives. The program will conclude with a Q&A, so please hold on to your questions at the end. And on that note, I will turn the mic over to Tavia.
Thank you, Alex, for that introduction, and thank you to the organizers of this event and the exhibition for making this event possible. Can you hear me? I've been told not to speak too closely into this mic. Maybe a little bit closer? Okay. Thank you all for coming, and I'm so excited to be here with EJ. And I'm going to let you catch your breath a little bit before we start, and maybe show a slide. But before I do that, we're here to talk about a monumental offering of potential energy, and I want to thank you for offering the additional energy of coming down to talk about it, like right after having been present in the gallery throughout the day. You're about midway through this piece, and you've just come downstairs from being in the gallery all day. So my first question is, how do you feel?
Currently I'm a little cold. After, gotta let the blood circulate again after being flat and in there all day. I feel oddly excited, but like, thank you for being here, thank all of you for being here. I feel crazy. I feel totally insane right now, but I feel mostly good.
Wonderful. Let's keep the good feeling flowing. And I want to turn to an image that I was struck by from your work. And this is the end, some stills from I believe the ending of your first solo exhibition. And I thought somehow there is some parallels between the decision to be present and part of this work and the very beginning of your performance work. What was it like to come to the decision to end a piece in this way? And does this feel different?
Well, I was, this piece, I was installed like a work, a sculpture. I was in that crate for about maybe an hour or two before the show opened. And so when people came in, they were sort of like, what's happening? Where's EJ? Like, why is the show not starting? And I was in the crate, and the performance was the curators and the people who ran the space would like install me as they would traditional work or sculpture. So I was nude in the crate for about like 2 hours, and then placed on that plinth that you see like there. And then the ending, after about 2 more hours of standing still, they deinstalled me and put me back in the crate. And I was reminded of this piece recently when speaking to one of the curators, one of the organizers of the space who I ran into or reconnected with recently. And she was the one who pointed out the parallels between what's happening now and my first solo presentation like ever. So it's kind of like, this was like 6 years ago. So it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm finding myself coming back to where it all started, I guess, just thinking about like, I don't know, maybe body as object, as subject, and stillness in a way too.
Stillness, absolutely. I want to ask more about this, your work prior to today, but I want to at least begin by thinking about the piece that we're kind of in the midst of, or you're in the midst of, right? Halfway through. If I can turn this to, I think, just one of the images from a monumental offering of potential energy. This piece has drawn attention in the press and social media because of the first impression that strikes many people, which is a sight of a black male body prone, and a sight which brings a shock to so many, given the context of the world today and police murders of young black men and women, which I know is a concern of yours and something that has appeared thematically in your work. But I want to ask a smaller question. As you lie there, how do you deal with that moment when someone sees you for the first time and perhaps draws a gasp? Do you ever want to react? Do you ever react?
I always want to react, but I'm so deep in the thing, like so deep in it, after about what feels like 30 minutes, that's like usually the mark of like, okay, I'm here again, I'm at work, because everything just kind of disappears, and then, you know, I go in and out of being really conscious and aware of my body primarily, and then like hypersensitive to the bodies of others. So when I feel people get about halfway and then stop, and it's like that moment where like I have to take a deep breath and like, I don't know, be there in a way, but allow enough sort of psychic space for them to be there with me. Because a lot of people at that halfway point, when they see me, I can feel them stop and then they turn away and leave. They never make it to the end. So yeah, I want to react sometimes, but I think, you know, part of me not reacting is like, you know, making space for other people to have their experience as well, and trying as much as I can not to dictate that. But yeah, I can feel people's like anxieties, and I can feel their fears like before they even get to me. It's a lot.
Given that you're spending a lot of time in the gallery and not interacting with your audience, I wonder whether you have looked at any of the ways in which the piece has been, for instance, on social media. Have you looked at any of the photography? I have some here which I can, if you're ready. Nothing shocking, so just to, you know, it's a different perspective on the work.
Yeah, no, I've seen some of the photos, and I think, you know, some people, when photographing, they are, you know, at a pretty respectful like distance, and then like this one, for instance, like there's some that people get really close, and I like, even, you know, toward the end when I started to feel the room fill up a little, I was like tense, you know, because it had never been that many people so close for an extended period of time, and it like immediately jolted me out of the like sort of level 6 state that I was in, and like got me all like, oh shit, this is about to begin. And so when people get close, when people photograph me, and I remember someone literally crouched down and stuck her phone in my face, and that's when I like just turned the other way because I didn't know what else to do. But yeah, I've been seeing some of them. These are so funny to look at right now.
It's remarkable for me in doing my research for this event how consistent the color palette ends up being, as if everyone uses the exact same Instagram filter, but also it kind of fills the room at this sort of wonderful pink, I call it the Miami Vice palette of pink and hot pink and blue. But the room is actually different, but the photography often ends up this.
For sure. Yeah, I thought it ends up purple a lot in photographs, but the longer that I'm in there, which is a long time, it photographs really differently. And then when I look out at the main galleries, those lights are green, so there's like a whole bunch of optical things happening.
It's almost, I was thinking today that there's something almost hypnotic about the lights, and maybe that gives me a way of asking a question not only about the body, which I'm sure and perhaps members of the audience will have questions about, but the fact that the way you designed and constructed the piece, what you confront first is not you, but the wooden roller coaster that you built with the neon lights illuminating its tracks. And you talked a little bit about this with other interviewers. And I've been thinking about how roller coaster is quite a familiar sight in many childhoods, American childhoods. And I wanted to ask if there was anything particular in your experience with roller coasters, an incident perhaps, that has led you to visit them again and again in your imaginative life, and to look to them now in terms of an installation with a scale in which you are present for.
It had always just been something that I wasn't really ever a sports kid, I mean, science was cool. Roller coasters had always just been a thing that I was genuinely interested in. And like from a very, very young age, loved riding them, drawing them, just thinking about them. It was kind of like that thing that, makes you kind of like kick a little faster, but you don't know why. So when I got here, and I'm sitting in a big blank, scary studio on the first day, it's just kind of like, what am I gonna do here? And so just took a piece of paper, drew some like loopy lines, and I was like, oh, I'm just gonna like draw this roller coaster real quick and then like get a sandwich. But like that drawing ended up being the thing that just like, I couldn't let go of it, just because it opened up space for me to do that thing that I really like, is just like spend hours on YouTube watching roller coaster videos and like other people on the internet nerding out about like the fastest. Like I was literally last night just, this is what I do for fun. I was like watching what, like the Six Flags press release like video of like what they're unveiling for 2017, and like that's exciting to me, So it's just like.
Did you ever work in an amusement park, or want to be a designer and engineer of roller coasters?
Yes, I did. I didn't work in an amusement park, but when I was younger, kids want to be like a vet or an astronaut. I was like, I want to be a structural engineer so I can design and build roller coasters. That's a lot of math.
I think AutoCAD for that now, right? It's fascinating because this piece, although not all of your work, is quite quiet, right? And when one thinks of a roller coaster, I at least think of a really noisy, frenetic, it's mass culture, right? So, how do you get from the one place to the other and finding a place of stillness and potentiality in a roller coaster? Is it after hours at the amusement park, or has it been shuttered, or where is this amusement park where you're currently?
I think that's a good question, because I feel like on the physics nerd tip, the potential energy train is ascending the lift hill. The potential energy of the train is like greatest at the top, like right before it does its thing, and the rest is like kinetic energy. And so when it's at the station, it's like not moving at all, and when it's loading, I feel like I don't know, so much of my life, like we've talked before, so much of my life in this body, in a black body, like being queer, it's like, it's not quiet. It's very loud, and aggressive, and violent, and like, that's my experience. And so I feel like the counter to that, the counter to all of those loops and twists and turns, like, has to absolutely be a sort of self-imposed, like, quietness and stillness, because if I don't make room for that, then, like, I don't know, it's gonna be, like, not as fun.
So if the body is a vehicle, then you're parked in the station when you're lying on the platform. Yeah. Since you mentioned the politics of being working as a black queer artist, some of your again, not all of your work has homoerotic overtones. Thinking, for example, of "Oh Captor, My Captor," which I think I may have an image up here. But I know you have thought about that image a lot, actually. Is there a queer sensibility in your work, even when there's no direct homoerotic overtone? And if there is, what would you say that is?
I would say there's a... Well, for this work in particular, or the Monumental framework,
yeah.
That color, I was like really intentional about, I wanted a color that was like, I wanted something that was like gonna be visually striking, but also something that, like pinks, purple not usually, but like pinks are sort of like gendered, and I wanted...
And the neon is reminiscent of the silence equals death icon, at least for a certain generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think as far as queer sensibilities, I think because I'm the one making it and sort of processing and conceiving of the work, that like that's inherent in it, even if it's not so directly stated or immediately present. And that the other image, the "Oh Captor, My Captor," it was, again, this is the fun. Began with stillness, sitting in like chairs opposite the room. My friend and collaborator David Bell, we, after that stillness, being hooded, tried to find each other and like box. We like hit each other a lot for like, I don't know, until we gassed out. I was probably the first to gas out at, I don't know, maybe around like 15, 20-minute mark, but it was just like, we were fighting each other. And then this was just kind of like, I have nothing left in me anymore, and just like use each other to kind of like catch our breath. And it was like that image that like, also is very still, but prior to that, we were delivering blows to each other's bodies.
Were you thinking at all about the Ralph Ellison reference in the making of the piece at all? I think of the famous Battle Royale scene that opens Invisible Man, which this, for me, is reminiscent of.
No, I think we were, I didn't make that connection. I think when we were making this, we were thinking a lot about, or I was thinking a lot in particular about this poem that talks about like this moment, that like clinch in boxing when I can't remember the line or the author right now. It's like the foggy brain.
Sure.
But something that's said like to the effect of like boxers who know so well, who want nothing more to hurt each other so badly, or like so thankful for like that moment of peace where they can like rest their head on the opponent's shoulder. And it like goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like living in this body is it's tough. And it's like that, like going, trudging through the shit and going through the tough stuff just for that like little sliver of like, it's sort of where I was like, I think that's what I'm after always. It's just kind of like a moment to chill.
Speaking of that moment and the kind of art that you are, your work is often placed in a genealogy with endurance art, performance art. Your inspirations include several artists who were a formative influence in the 60s, right? I'm thinking of Chris Burden, which I don't have a photo of here. Bruce Nauman, who I do, and others like Adrian Piper, whose early work possesses some similarity, or bears some comparison to yours. For instance, you both cultivate, silence, quiet, introspection as aspects of work that we sometimes think is necessarily, loud or provocative. We've already talked about the ways in which you engage those two different, that dialectic. But I wanted to ask you about what draws you, insofar as you, I'm sure you have reflected on it, to this particular mode today in an art world that's far more mediated than was the case in the 60s, right? Where the camera that the Piper's holding in the Food for the Spirit is far more ubiquitous. Does the intimacy or commitment to presence change when, for instance, audience decide whether or not to attend or participate remotely or through social media and live streaming?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a totally different set of conditions for sure. Again, when I'm in the galleries and I feel people come in and they get to the end, usually the immediate response is to like whip out the phone, snap a couple photos, and then leave. So there is very rarely, or more often the engagement is through the phone for like a split second, and then they bounce. So I'm always like really appreciative when someone just there with me for like even 10 seconds of silence is like really generous. But so I think what draws me to working this way now is that I really I feel it, like I feel it so deeply. Again, when everyone started to fill that corner, I got anxious and nervous, but like kind of excited because like as a performer, this stuff would be for me like so unsatisfying and so boring if I didn't have an audience. I think audiences, people bring like a kind of charge. You all bring like a charge with you, and I think you're absolutely necessary for me to complete and make my work. And I think that's why I do it, because it's like the spaces in my life that allow me to feel wholly and fully and deeply, and not be like self-conscious about like feeling, I think to feel is like really I don't know, maybe can't say taboo, like it just, I feel like such a like, oh my God, I feel it.
We feel it too, right? Yeah. And I want to open up to the audience in a minute. I'm sure you have questions. You're hopefully feeling it. But it kind of as a segue into a larger conversation, I wanted to kind of go back to the music that was playing when people were entering. Those of you who may know was it was a clip from Frank Ocean's visual album. Now I know you have actually written about Endless, which is why I'm bringing it up now, right? It's related to your interest. And some people who are new to your work and to performance art might be surprised to learn that you're equally passionate about popular music and video, in addition to your performances, drawings, installations for gallery and museum settings. So I guess the question then is, what interests you as an artist, a musician like Ocean, who, as you know, is himself deeply interested in visual art and installation and photography? Is there some kind of What?
And feeling.
And feeling. What's the feeling, if you could name it?
I think it's a sort of a broad, reaching kind of connectivity. You know, like when we nerd out about like the last show we binge watched, or like Frank's album, or anything that like exists in the realm of like pop culture, like oftentimes that audience is like people with a capital P. It's like, it's the language of the people. And I feel, you know, as an artist, like whether I'm in museum spaces, gallery spaces, academic spaces, whatever it is, I've been trained and conditioned to have certain kinds of conversations that like, I realize are not really accessible to like the same audiences, like people with a capital P. But I feel like, I don't know, I want to be able to have something like this, me lying on a wooden platform, be as accessible and meaningful for someone, you know, as the way someone would play like, you know, Ivy on repeat for like an hour. Like that's, I don't want someone to feel as though they're like isolated or like pushed out because they don't like get it, you know? I hear so many times people come in and they're just like the first question is like, okay, what is this like? What is this? What is this supposed to symbolize? Like that's the word I hear often. Like what does this symbolize? And then like there's like usually a friend in the room who's just like, you know, the self-proclaimed like art expert who'll be like, okay, let me talk.
We all know the person, right?
And then they start to describe like what it symbolizes, and then the friend who poses the question is like, oh, okay, and then it's like, and then like that's it, like that's like the rule. There's no room for having like your favorite song on repeat like change at the like 57th play.
Yeah, no, and I think that, I mean, you know, from our conversations, you are someone who feels that passionately about performance work, right? Like Chris Burden or anyone else that you draw inspiration from, and it's not necessarily about the symbolism or meaning, right? There's something maybe in the popular that's able to actually just go directly. Either you feel it or you're not, and we all feel that way about music, right? Some people feel endless, some people don't. It makes you wait for it. So there's something, there's a kind of common enthusiasm, perhaps in turning towards. I mean, you also do sometimes sing. Not tonight. No. But you got a mic. Okay. So, did you want to respond, or could we open to the?
This could be a good time to open it.
Okay. All right. So I hope you've been saving up your questions. I believe that.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if the mic works.
Okay.
You can still have questions about the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have one? No, you don't hear me. Okay. Anybody? It doesn't have to be a question. There we go.
Or a comment. Question or
just
comment.
talk.
Thanks a lot, EJ. I think that piece is incredible. And I was drawn to it like, in many different ways. But one thing I kept thinking was looking at you was your eyes. You know, and I kind of was thinking, oh, EJ will just shut his eyes the whole time. Because that's how I pictured you, and then you had your eyes open. And I'm wondering, like, that decision or that felt.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's super important to me to have my eyes open for this, because it, you know, for all the people who never quite make it back there, a lot of them do think that I'm sleeping, and this isn't right. This is, I want it to be known that, like, yeah, this is active, I'm there and I'm present, I hear you, I feel you, I'm there with you as well. And of course, you know, when I'm doing the long days, when it's like a 9-hour shift, inevitably I'll like doze off for like 5 or so, or what feels like 5 minutes, I don't know, it could be like 2 hours. But, and I always wake up just kind of like I missed that. Like there's a chunk of time that I just like wasn't present for. I don't know what happened. I don't know who was around or what they brought with them. And I feel, I mean, it's a very vulnerable position to be in already. But when I fall asleep for a little bit, it's even kind of more terrifying because, like, I don't know, like I've had, you know, people touch me a few times, and that's like always really weird. So I want, you know, the decision to keep the eyes open is like to communicate, like, I'm here, like I'm alive now.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? I think there's one in front of you.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to know if you felt actually, over the course of this performance, felt actually threatened. You talked about people touching you, feeling vulnerable, and the woman that put the camera right in your face. And I wanted to know if there was a moment where you actually ever felt, you know, physically threatened.
I would say that, yeah, that after that first time, because I thought, you know, I thought about it, I didn't think it was really ever going to happen. I knew people would probably be tempted, like tempted to touch me, but I never thought it would like actually happen. Maybe that's, I don't know, my like naivete or something, but it was after that first time I was like, oh, okay, this is.
Does that change it for you? Does that change the performance, like the meaning of the piece at all?
Yeah, like, because I know that now the like offering of stillness and the offering of like quietness is now quite literally like an offering of like my body in this way, that like even though I have my own and can assert my own agency, like I'm still in front of people who also decide what they do with like their bodies, and now we're interfacing, and there's this like this moment where like we can be in the same room and occupy the same space, but of course do it quite differently, and like that's the negotiation that I think, where I hope I'm illustrating in the work, that like when I leave here, it's the same exact thing. Like when I leave my front door, it's like this body reads a certain way, your body reads a certain way. How does it read together when we like bump up next to each other in public space? And like what are those spaces that allow for some bodies to move through space freely and not threatened? And what are the conditions that allow for other bodies to be like ripped apart?
Anybody else?
Oh, no, I was looking to ask someone, but I'm just in response, in your response to that question, I'm wondering whether there's something utopian in the vulnerability.
If there's something utopian in vulnerability, probably, yeah. Because I think because the other option is for me to be like totally closed off and say like, okay, like I've been hurt this many times, I've been threatened this many, like I was walking like to meet Amanda, like what was that, like a month or two, like shortly after the Pulse nightclub shooting. I'm just walking, you know, it was literally 2 days after that, from my house to meet Amanda, like after work for like a glass of wine. And I mean, I pass a group of men like on the stoop, and one of them says to the others like, oh look, here comes another one. And then they all look at me, and then another one mimics like gunshot noises, like as I'm walking by. And it took everything in that moment for me, like, not to just like unleash and rage, but also not to just like fall on the sidewalk and cry. Like, and that's like, yeah, of course it's utopian, but like, if every time that happened, I just like shut off and walled off and became this like hard, cold person, I don't think we wouldn't ever be able to like have conversations like these. We wouldn't be able to like, you know, get any of the most amazing works, like whether music, art, film. Like, we couldn't actually build a culture if people build or change it if people didn't like allow themselves to be seen.
Yeah, and that's maybe what strikes me as utopian about it, right? Is that the first image is of a fallen body, either what the reference would be in some people's minds, a sleeping body, sleeping outdoors, homelessness, or, you know, a slain person, right? But the second is actually you're breathing and your eyes are open, right? You're dressed to the nines. Your white shoe, you know, there is something there, you know. So actually there's a working through in psychoanalytic terms of the trauma of death, right? Violence and abandonment. That actually is quite, you know, to me, I felt the energy in the room today as almost like a congregation, or at least, you know, a kind of a witness, right? You know,
Yeah.
and almost a procession when we move from that space to this one. Other questions, comments? Yes. And then, no.
Hi. I have a question about scale, I guess. Just because for me, I have always been terrified of roller coasters, and that has a lot to do with the size and the noise of them. And then in this piece, there's just such an interesting relationship of the scale to the room and how small the track actually is in comparison and stripped of its noise and size that really has always intimidated me. But then the way that it takes up the room in such a different way, you know, and that the power in your roller coaster is in its smallness almost, and but in its ability to still fill a space completely and force us to the parameters of the room. And I was just wondering sort of what you see in the track itself and how that, what is it about the track and the way that it goes up and down that is important to you, or why?
Well, I think I really wanted it to get, I really wanted it to be as tall and long as it could be to fit in that space. Because what you point out, that like you're pushed, you know, to the edge, pretty like literally, is something that I wanted it to have a sense of, I wanted it to tower over most bodies, and I think the tallest point is like almost 8 feet. And I wanted people, you know, when walking around it, to feel kind of like small in comparison. And I think the hills, the loops, the turns, like the whole thing, that track to address your later point. It's active, like there's a whole bunch of movement in the piece, even if I'm still. And I think that the noise, maybe, or like the pulse of the thing, I want it to come from like my body more than like the track itself, other than the track just being like big and like taller than most who walk around.
Well, I almost wonder if like this, why I felt so dwarfed in the space was because of the walls, you know, and because of your body, but also because of the fact that this structure that should be in my imagination, should be huge, is small and contained and therefore fills a space, you know what I mean? Like it's about its relationship to the walls, and that's why it feels so huge.
Damn. Okay. But yeah, like the relationship to the walls, because I'm thinking like it's contained, like we are in an institution, like we are like sort of like bound by certain you know, institutional conditions. Ooh, okay. Give me a little bit on that one.
I think we had a question up in front. Yeah.
And so this will actually be the last question for the night.
I was just curious, what's the story behind the title? Like what information?
The title, well, again, potential energy, I think. I've actually never taken a physics class, so I don't really know. But I know.
Sounds right to me.
I know enough about roller coasters that, like, you know, that like so. When thinking about titling works, I get, you know, sometimes pretty flowery with my language. But I think, well, first, I think roller coasters are like basically public sculpture. It's like public kinetic sculpture. They're like huge, they're architectural, they're like, I don't know, design feats. They're amazing. And they're placed in the context of like pop culture. Like they're not in, walled institutions. They're out there for people to just like eat their churros next to. And so like when I'm thinking of that and like the structure, it's a monument. Like they're monumental. They're huge, and they keep getting taller and faster. And so when I thought about like my body as a part of that, and I'm offering my presence, my body, it's kind of like a play on words. It's like the monument, but like a monumental offering of a certain type of energy, my energy, potential energy, an energy at rest, a body at rest, a body that's like not moving currently, but like as soon as I get to like the crest of that hill, after October 30th, when this is all over, like, y'all better watch out, you know? Because, like, let's go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So actually, we do have some time for more questions. So if you guys have any.
Any additional takers? Oh, in front.
So
Security?
Yeah. I gotta get in there.
Of course.
You were talking about the presence on social media. If EJ had gone through it and thought through it, and we had a moment at the beginning of the exhibition where with our communications team, we wanted to know if the artist felt it was appropriate to take photographs in that space. And it was kind of this Carol Walker-esque moment. You know, it reveals actually what's in the eye of the beholder and like what you instill in that experience. Like the girl on the bottom right, that you gave her a background for staging a photograph, you know, like that's what that piece kind of meant for her. But I wondered, you know, I've seen people react to the installation into the space and to my description of like what they're performing, and think about that a lot. You know, I think the most striking thing is kind of getting that warm glow over that edge of the gallery, kind of lighting a portion of the Thomas space, like that kind of ambiance that it creates. And that guiding kind of light that draws people up into it. But when you were talking about feeling people, which I know you do, you feel so much. And I can really appreciate that. Like I'm imagining feeling people coming up to that threshold, that midpoint, and I've done it in walkthroughs where people kind of like hesitate because they see a body lying there. And what that brings up for people, whether it's lived and personal or, you know, received in media images. So I wanted to ask you, just what happens in the moments where those do cross the threshold? What have been some of the more lasting memories for you, like the most striking interaction? I can think of one that you told me, but I'm just, you know, as the person kind of receiving this energy. Another thing, just quickly, that I love, some people on Instagram think that you are generating the powerful lights. That's my favorite. That's powerful.
Living in a speculative fantasy, right? You're generating fan fiction already.
Can somebody like ship me already with like burning clay? Come on,
I think it's happening.
Yeah, I think so that's in part of people's explanation. They're like, yeah, no, like he's the battery, and like he's the energy for this. But no, I've had a few like really memorable encounter or responses, I guess. But I don't even like some. Well, I guess one, maybe the most recent that you and I Tavia talked about also was like some guy came in, a man and a woman, kind of like like around, I don't know, they're like our age, 20s, 30s, I don't know how old anybody is anymore, but they felt anyway, so they came in and she, the woman was talking about like, she was like, well, the guy basically read the piece as like a comment on homelessness, which I thought was like really interesting. When he first started to talk, I was like, homelessness, like, nah, dude, like, what do you?
Like when you hear misinterpretations being generated in real time and you're prepared to respond, like, what do you do?
Instead of like side eye, just close it. Just but then the more, the longer he spoke, what he mentioned, which was like kind of mind blowing to me, he was like, there was one time where he was lying down somewhere, and like so many people like came to like ask him if he was okay. There's like a white man saying this, and he's like, and then he started thinking about all the other people who like lie down and no one even like cares to ask if they're okay. And he started talking about like how different bodies read in space, and it was like that moment where I was like, I guess like this is also kind of a little bit about like homelessness. Like it was really cool to have that space. I mean, for real, like to have it open up and in real time, like and go somewhere that I could have never gone alone. That was really cool.
That's generally more questions. If you want to pick one.
I saw your hand first.
I was just thinking about the question before about the walls and in relation to the size of the sculpture, and also your platform and you being there, and also just the experience of a roller coaster. I know it's like really cool and exciting, but I think there's also a feeling of confinement, and that's just, I know with the idea of potential energy, maybe that feeling can be drawn from it too. I was just wondering if any of that was, I mean, having been there all day, was confinement a part of this at all?
I think, a little, definitely. Because as I was conceiving of the work, or just like planning for it all year, in studio visits it'd be kind of difficult to talk about this work in particular because it hadn't been made yet, and I'm still making it, I'm still in the middle of it, so the conversations usually would just center around like how people felt about roller coasters, and what I noticed is that like there's hardly any middle ground. Like people are like really into them, or just like not at all. And a lot of the time, that sort of like confinement or submission of control is like what came up a lot for the people who are into them and are not into them, is that like once they're strapped in, like that's terrifying because they have like no choice in the matter, like they're just in it. And but then that's the same reason that people like throw their hands up on the first hill, because they're like, I submit to this sort of like restriction and confinement. And I think when I'm in there, yeah, it's a self-imposed confinement, but like I've got like a certain time constraint. The platform is 4 by 7 by a foot. You know, there's like I'm confined by like my mind, just like me and my thoughts all day.
Also, maybe like being part of a residency is like a little bit like that. Like you're in there and you're kind of along for the ride and you can't really.
Yeah, I'm like locked in. It's like you know, it's very much an institution.
Can I have a thought on that? You know, just I have 2 more questions too, but like, and I'm going to age myself by saying, you know, that not only are people very polarized about roller coasters, right, but like where you are, aging, you know, like many people age out of their enthusiasm for roller coasters. And I thought about that while I was. I used to love them when I was a teenager, as many people do, and now I can't get on one, right? And what I think, to hazard a sociological generalization, you know, roller coasters seem to be really, you know, teenagers are the kind of target audience, and why you know, it's a combination of being, you know, trapped, which you are as a child in particular, right, controlled all the time, right, and this sort of like newfound freedom that you don't yet know how to do anything with, right? You're not fully an adult yet, right? And somehow the excitement, the combination of being, you know, subjected to this really thrilling ride, right? It almost does seem like it's too perfect an analogy for like the decision to like become an artist, actually, and to hold on to that, you know, simultaneous sense of it's really liberating and disorganizing to go on a roller coaster, right? And it's something that many people kind of just sort of age out of their willingness to go into, right? Body art as well, live art, performance art is also something that takes a lot out of the individual who's doing it, right? And you have to get a thrill out of it, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I do. Damn, I like roller coasters and like endurance performance taking a lot out of you. Like, I might have to go like right up on this. No, yeah, I think well, there's also that kind of like teenagers are like, you know, nothing bad ever happened to me. I'll be alive forever. I'm starting to maybe age out a little bit. I get like on 4 rides and I'm like, girl, where's the churro stand? You know? Like it's real. I get tired.
We're gonna age out of the churro stand too, my friend. Do we have time for those last 2 questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, AJ, thanks for talking with us. Yeah, I think this is kind of related to the last question and your responses, but I guess I just wanted to hear about the way you're thinking through duration of this piece. As definitely for roller coasters, the kind of period of potential energy building is really short. It's like a minute or something, and you know, I feel like those kind of, it's like the 7 stages of grief or something that you're going through really quickly, and then you get to the acceptance at the end, you know. But I guess like, you know, you're halfway through this now, and I wonder if there's a specific kind of progression that you've experienced, or something that you were expecting.
Yeah, I think now that I'm more than halfway, I'm starting to prepare a little bit more for like what happens after. So I'm like really deliberate about like my diet. I started working out again because like it's like, I don't know, this is taking quite a toll, and now that I can see the end. Well, first the 3.5 months, the open to close is like, that was already set in place for me, and I like, and again that sort of like head nods back to the fact that like this is like a thing that operates like a machine that has like many moving parts, and I'm just like one cog in the machine. So that like already dictated how long the piece would last for me. But now that I'm like nearing the end, I mentioned this earlier, this all feels like caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly thing. Like I have no idea what, like I have no idea how this is gonna feel when it's over, like who I'm gonna be, or like what kind of potential energy I am actually storing up for when this is over. But I do believe very strongly that when it's over, like, yeah, I will have changed drastically. Which can be said about like anything that we do, anything that we enter into and come out of. Like it's about transformation every time. Yeah, yeah, I'm nearing the end, and I'm like, ironically, like kind of scared, because like now this, as painful as it has been, like physically, as like mentally grueling as it's been like the past 9 weeks, it's been the most consistent thing in my life, and now I've grown comfortable in it, and now that it's going to end, I'm like, I'm scared. So I'm just trying to like eat right and like try and like, be good to myself.
Thank you.
Any other question? Really, there's one over here. I see one in the back.
I can talk about.
Okay.
It's really wonderful hearing you talk about why the roller coaster, the experience of the roller coaster, the experience of people in the room, you on the platform. But I'm wondering what or how the process of actually building the roller coaster figures into how you think about the piece and the people's experience of it. I know that you built it, right? And I have a sense that maybe it was that actual process was important somehow, and maybe also part of the energy being built or stored or exerted. But I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Can we tag onto that too? You should speak in your answer about the future of the piece without your presence, if you've gotten to the point of being able to mention that.
Totally. So yeah, I spent many months planning and drawing before actually building. But once I started to build, yeah, it was like many trips to Home Depot, lugging wood up the freight elevator to the third, like so many sweaty days. And this was actually like, so yeah, like in art school I built something with wood like a time or two. But like this was like a completely new undertaking, and it was exhausting. And so I learned a lot along the way. It was very physical in a lot of the ways that I think draws me to like this type of performance work. So even in the building, it was like a rigorous kind of like intentional like heading for something. And I'd come home at the end of the day like so dusty and tired, but like satisfied. And so I guess it's like still, yeah, this is just like phase 2 of that. Yeah, materially, I think I don't know, everything about the wood, the smell when it's like being cut, it's all very like bodily, sensory. And then I guess phase like 3 or 4 or whatever. I don't think, usually if I'm like, when I present a new performance, that's it. It's like, I do it once, I have photos, maybe some video, but I try not to re-perform anything because like the moment has passed kind of, so I've been thinking about this, if this work would ever be shown again, it wouldn't be me performing, it would be the sculpture and then all the context that like we feel around it. Like even tonight, like this conversation gets sort of like tacked on to this work. And I've been, you know, thinking through like a pretty ambitious idea that if it does get shown, or that it would, I'd like to set up conditions to where performers or other artists or creatives, whoever, would be like hired by like the host institution or whatever to perform a piece of their own choosing, just kind of like continuing this idea of potential and being elevated and illuminated and supported by, you know, whoever wants to take on that role, support it.
To let another vehicle get on the, please, on the track. That's great.
I think I saw we had 2 more questions.
2 more? You good?
Yeah.
Okay.
2 more.
2 more and then we'll.
You know how some days you wake up and you're just excited about life, about work, and some days you're just like, fuck this, I'm ready to call it in and just, you know, give up, give in, or whatever. What's the lows and highs that you've had so far? Has there been any moment when, after 9 hours, after you're done, where your intentions and what you set out to, you know, put forward just went deeper than, you know, you've ever thought it, made you so emotional? Or, you know, what's each day been like? What are, you know, just
so yeah, there's a lot of ups and downs with something like this, and I think what I love about what you just mentioned is that like everybody knows what that feels like, you know. And in this work, I thought like, okay, this is gonna be hard, but I'm gonna get through it. What I also realized is that like I have really amazing days on that platform where like I coast through, the 9 hours fly by, I get up with a ton of energy, and there's like other days where I'm just like, what am I doing? Why am I hate this? Like, but there was one day in particular where I did get up out of bed and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, not the piece. I'm just like, yeah, like I was having a really bad day. And I remember getting on the platform and like this thing that like I didn't want to do, this thing that had been like so hard so many times, being like the only thing that could like hold me in that moment. In that like really bad day, it was like the thing that like the only thing that I like had. And like I woke up 9 hours later, not woke up, but like got up and was like grateful, you know, grateful that I knew, even if like today was shit, like, you know, like I know this is like sounding like really like motivational poster, but like I'm like so serious, y'all. Like yeah, some days are terrible, some days are really hard to get through, but they pass, you know? And I think it's just like human, it's just like being alive.
roller coaster?
Exactly.
Not to give any performance trade secrets away, but did you approach it in any way in terms of breaking down the time, or like, if I were gonna do 8 hours, you know, I don't think I could possibly just get up, walk. Talk to other people who do, you know, like, you have like a ritual to get through. To get through it, yeah.
Yeah, I start, like I mentioned earlier, I start with like, you know, what feels like 30 minutes of just like breathing deeply, consciously, and then once I start to feel my mind like slowly detach from my body, I start to count how many times I shift positions throughout the day. And that's kind of like my marker of like, okay, I know that like I've held this position for somewhere between like 15 to 20 minutes. And I've like averaged out, I won't give you the number, but like I'll hold that a little closely.
Yeah, you gotta keep that.
So that's my, I've got like a ballpark number of position changes in a day where I know that I'm like nearing the end of the shift, and like that gets me through, just to like anchor onto something.
One last final question.
I think I saw one over there. Is it still happening?
All right, let's move on.
So I remember the first time I was ever taught about like potential kinetic energy. I was like in 6th grade, and somebody was holding the ball, and they were like, okay, this ball at this moment has potential energy, and then the person drops the ball, and at that point it's kinetic energy. And that's probably not true, but I think about that all the time in terms of like people, and in terms of like you have no control over it. I just thought it was weird that the ball didn't have any say on whether it was potential kinetic energy at all. And I think about that in terms of people in health, and we really don't have any say on whether we're still moving, especially in roller coasters. You just like submit yourself to the situation. Kind of every day you submit yourself to the situation. And I was also just thinking how I think your stillness can be potential, but it can also be kinetic, depending on like, how you approach that day or what sort of energy you're giving in. Yeah, I have no control over what kind of, I mean, you have control over it, so it's sort of, not even just an institution, but just like everything around you defines the potential of kinetic kind of. I was just thinking, that was my question.
Yeah, I can't, there's like the sort of like Webster definition that I came across or something was like, the part that I touched you was like a potential energy is an energy of like a body in relation to like other bodies, and they weren't talking about like physical bodies, they meant like, you know, like matter, like things, but even that language I thought was like really striking, because you mentioned it's like potential energy could only be understood as it relates to like other moving or non-moving things, which I think is kind of beautiful, right? We're not all out here alone. Thanks.
We're not alone.
We're not alone.
Let me thank you, EJ, for so
On that note, we really want to thank you all for coming out tonight. Sorry, you can hear me now. We want to thank you all for coming out tonight. This really wouldn't have been possible without your presence. Thank you to Tavia and to EJ. The museum galleries are still open for about another 30 minutes, so we invite you to go out into that space and continue this conversation amongst yourselves. We also have a few more programs coming up in the next couple of months, which you can find listed on the back of your programs for tonight. The last, the one on October 20th being the last Artist Voice program for the current artists in residence. So with Jordan Castile, the painter upstairs. We invite you to come to that as well. It's sure to be another beautiful event. So thank you.